That was the longest 4 minutes of my life. So we crossed the finish line and they immediately put up the red flag because the Oxford coxswain had put up his hand, meaning that he was protesting the race. Then they start deliberating and it was for 4 minutes. So we were just sitting there. And then finally the umpire put up the white flag, meaning that we had won. But I didn't know that the white flag meant that we had won. So like everyone was celebrating and I was like, does that mean we won? Like what happened? I don't know.
Welcome to The Other 3 Years, a show for anyone who has an Olympic-sized dream they want to turn into a reality. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of The Other 3 Years. My name is Kristi Wagner, and this week on the podcast, I have guest rower Megan Lee. Megan is an American rower who recently won the boat race with Cambridge. Megan and I actually talk all about the boat race in the episode, so if you don't know what that is, listen and you will learn literally all about it. But it is one of the most kind of historical and traditioned rowing races in the world, happening every spring between Oxford and Cambridge. The men's race goes back a really long time. The women's race hasn't been happening as long, but now they sort of have equal coverage and interest and stuff. So Megan grew up in Massachusetts and then rowed at Duke University. She is a 3-time U.S. national team member, and actually this is her second appearance on the podcast because she was part of the gold medal winning under 23 8 last summer, who all came on for an episode. Our conversation was so fun and one you definitely won't want to miss. But before we get into that, here is an update on what is currently going on in my training. It is actually the 1-year anniversary of the podcast, which is kind of crazy. I was just thinking a little bit about how I've been doing this for a year, and a lot of you people listening have been listening for a year. That's truly so amazing and so nice. I don't even know how to thank you. It's just really cool. But I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to share and sort of mark this year of my life in this podcasting. I think it'll be really cool, like in the future, to be able to look back on and listen and maybe cringe a little bit. Sort of when you like look at your old Facebook photos from prom, you're like, what was going on? I also just think it's helped me to open up about rowing in my life and be able to talk about it and share it, because I think it's really important that people know that everything isn't easy and everything isn't straightforward, and unforeseen things happen all the time. And also, like, just as quickly as things can go your way, things cannot go your way, and nothing is guaranteed, and you have to keep working the whole time. And yeah, I just hope that people have sort of gotten to see like a little bit inside not only my life, but a lot of elite athletes' lives that aren't glamorous like at all. I think that it's so easy to see sort of just the highlights version of things. And not that this is like lowlights, but I think it is a little bit of lowlights. My producers were saying like I could reflect a little bit on how I've changed over the past year. I mean, a lot of things in my life are different than they were a year ago. And I guess I would just say that I'm proud of myself for navigating those things, but also just like so grateful to the people around me. And I think I've learned more than ever that you can't do things alone. Like, you literally need people in your corner, and you need to lean on them when you need to and then be there for them when they need you. Like, I think that community is so important, whether that's your family or friends, or in my case, like teammates and coaches. And I just think it's really hard to do things by yourself. And I think for some reason, I am sort of a kind of person that thinks I need to do things by myself. And it's been, I think, good for me to realize that like I don't need to do everything by myself, and I'm not alone. And I have a lot of people who want to help me. I just have to let them help me. And I think sometimes asking for help can be seen as a weakness, but I guess I've tried to instead see it as a sign of strength. Like, I'm strong enough to know that I need help and that I can ask for help. And that doesn't mean that I'm a weak person. It just means that right now I need help. And I guess I just would want to share that with other people. Like, there's no harm in asking for help when you need it. And it doesn't make you weak or needy or any of those things. It just makes you smart. Of course, there's some things that you do on your own, but I think that asking for help is a skill I've learned and still am working on. I guess I've also learned that nobody really cares about other people that much. Like, I think I spend time sometimes thinking about what other people are going to think of things I do. But I've sort of realized, one, it doesn't really matter what anyone else is thinking about me. But two, other people aren't thinking about me. Like, I guess I was maybe a little self-centered and thinking that other people cared what I was doing. But really, everyone just cares about themselves. And I'm not saying that in like a bad way. I actually think it's like a good thing. But I think sometimes we can all be like a little self-conscious. And I guess I've just realized, like, I don't need to be so self-conscious, because in reality, like, other people aren't noticing the things that I'm doing. I guess maybe people notice a little bit because I literally share it on a podcast. And rowing wise, I mean, it's funny. Like, rowing is such an interesting sport. It's literally just the same thing over and over again. We constantly have things to work on. As soon as you sort of fix one thing, you have a new thing to work on. And it's really, I think, cool in that way. Like, you can constantly be getting better. You can constantly be striving for more speed, fitness, technique, rowing with other people. Like, there's so many things that you can just continue to improve on, and you're never going to be perfect. So I think it's sort of this quest for perfection in like an imperfect system, or in an imperfect world, I guess. I'd like to say that, yeah, so many things rowing wise we've gotten so much better, and I have, I think I've made improvements technically and physiologically that I am proud of. But at the same time, like, there's so many things that I'm still working on, that we're still working on, as a team, as boatmates, as individuals. So like, it's hard to say, oh yeah, we've done all these things, because like, there's still so much that you want to make better. But that's, I think, what's so cool about the sport and sports in general. Like, you're always striving for more, and I just think that's what's like addictive about sports, but also just makes them so fun and so satisfying. As far as just like right now what's actually going on, we're in Princeton, and this is the second week in Princeton. We've sort of settled in a little bit. I'm not going to lie, it's a little chilly in the mornings. I became a Florida person and got used to it being warm, and it's not even that cold. I've lived in Boston and Connecticut and in upstate New York. Like, I know cold. I know how to wear warm clothes, but like, I don't know. This morning it was like 37 degrees, which I know is not that cold, but I wore my splash jacket and my pogies. So maybe I'm a wimp now. Rowing's getting better, I think, like, just sort of settling in, new routines, new rhythms. Like, it's just funny. It takes us a little while to settle in everywhere we go. But it is nice that, like, I feel comfortable everywhere we go. Like, I feel comfortable in Sarasota. I feel comfortable in Princeton. I feel comfortable in Italy. Like, you know what to expect when you get there. So even though maybe it takes a few days to really settle in, like, you do feel comfortable. Yeah, we're just going to do some more workouts this week. Try to have a little bit of fun. I'm excited to see the Challengers movie, I think it's called, with Zendaya. That's like a tennis movie coming out this weekend. That should be fun. Love a good sports rom-com-y flick. We live right across the street from a movie theater, so I love going to the movies. I love popcorn. Looking forward to that for sure. So now it is time for my conversation with Megan Lee. Hope you enjoy it. All right. Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm super excited.
Thank you for having me. I can't wait.
Return guest, right?
Yep.
Second time. Just many fewer friends. And I have to say, like, when you guys were on it with your whole 8, the number of people that were like, that was such an amazing episode. And also, like, they must have learned how to go to Zoom school so well, because everyone was so polite. And like,
I remember you were like, can you unmute yourselves? And we were all just sitting there on mute. Like, no, we're supposed to be on mute.
Yeah, it was so impressive. It was like so funny. So yeah, not all horrible things came out of online learning, I feel like. So congratulations on like the past month. So exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been super exciting.
I definitely want to get into like everything that's happened this past year, but I thought maybe we could just start with your background a little bit, maybe starting with like how you got involved in rowing in the first place.
So I was a competitive swimmer. I started swimming when I was 6 years old because my older brothers were swimmers and I would drive around in the car with them. And I finally was like, I don't want to drive them to practice. I actually want to do it. So then I got really into swimming and I swam from when I was 6 to when I was 16. And then after that, it had been 10 years and I just kind of wanted a change. And I really liked my high school and I wanted to be more part of my high school community. And my high school had a rowing team and everyone was trying to convince me to join. So finally, I was like, fine, I'll do it. And then, so that was the spring of my sophomore year of high school. And I ended up really liking it. So then I rowed there and then I got recruited to Duke and I went to Duke for 4 years, loved my experience there. And then I decided to go to Cambridge after I graduated from Duke. I majored in international comparative studies and I kind of wanted to take some more business related classes. So I'm doing a master in management here at the business school. I also wanted to continue rowing and the boat race is such a big deal. So I was like, I need to go there and do that. So that's where I am now.
That's amazing. Okay, I have a few questions going back to like growing up high school times. So, when you stopped swimming and started rowing, what was different about rowing that made you like it more than swimming? Because I feel like the sports do have like a fair bit of crossover.
I really liked that I got to be outside. In swimming, I was always in a really humid pool. It would be a beautiful day outside, and I would be inside looking at the bottom of a pool. On weekends, I was always just on a pool deck, and I love being outside, being in nature. So I think that was the biggest thing for me. Also, that swimming is such an individual sport, and then rowing, I got to be with my friends when I was competing, which I also really liked, and that we could feed off of each other's energy. And I'm a really competitive person. So, like, swimming was good for me that I was just like always competing with my friends, but I think it was really important for personal growth. In rowing, I had to like work with people instead of just always trying to beat them.
I totally agree. I swam when I was younger and I just looking at the bottom of a pool was like the most boring thing to me.
Like mind numbing.
Yeah. I think that's why when I started rowing, I would just like look all around, all practice, like how like people would constantly be like, keep your head in the boat. I was like, but there's so much to look at.
Yeah.
And then Duke. So that's awesome. And I know that program has been like super on the rise. Megan must have been there your whole time, right?
Yeah, I was drawn to Duke with like having a female head coach and like an amazing coach all 4 years. I still keep in touch with her. So yeah, she really made the experience good for me.
And what was it like being a student athlete at Duke? I feel like it's a super sport minded school.
That was actually like another thing that I really liked about it. I felt that it was celebrated to be an athlete there. It wasn't like looked down upon or anything, which was exciting to me. And just the fact that you got so many perks and benefits. Like we had training table at night that you could have dinner with all of your teammates. And it was like a big buffet of free food, which was amazing. And you could get tutors for your classes and just like little things like that. I felt like I was treated really well because I was an athlete and it made my experience like having to do the difficult academic stuff. It just made it like a little bit easier because they gave so much support.
Yeah, definitely. Did you do 5 years? Like, how did COVID come into your experience?
So I was a freshman when we got sent home, which was really sad because like we got sent home in March of my freshman year. So I never had a racing season of that year. And then sophomore year was kind of weird because we lived in a hotel because Duke was really concerned that we were a big group all practicing together. So we lived in a hotel on campus, which like we're so lucky that we got to compete and everything, but it wasn't really a college experience with that. So then junior and senior year were like the real deal that I felt like I was going to college, rowing in college. Like the beginning of freshman year was good. And then 2 full good years, junior and senior year.
Yeah, I'm sure that kind of played a role too in you like wanting to keep doing school, like choosing to go to Cambridge after.
Yeah, definitely.
When did the idea sort of start boiling in your head and like how did you get the idea? Did you just know about it and think it seemed cool? Did someone like suggest it to you?
I had a teammate from England come and she was talking about the boat race and I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of cool." And then I started looking into it and then we watched the race, I think my junior year. And I was like, "Oh, that's like really really cool. That would be cool to be part of." Junior year I also started to think about what I was going to do after college and I knew that I wanted to keep rowing. So then I started looking at options that would help me keep rowing. And then I was like, "Oh, the boat race. I could keep rowing, do that." And then I started looking at what degrees they had. And the master in management is kind of ideal because it's for people straight out of college that want to go into business but don't have any business like academic background. So I was like, I check all these boxes. So then I toured Cambridge and Oxford the summer between junior and senior year. And once I came to Cambridge and I met with the coaches and I heard everything about the team, I was like, "Oh, this is where I need to go." So then I just had to apply and get in on my own, which I was a little nervous about because, in the US you can get athletic support, but it worked out. So,
That's so awesome. And so was your program just one, is it just the 1 year?
yeah, just 1 year. So, we got here in September for preseason for rowing and then my program started in October and it ends late July.
Can you just give like a brief overview of the boat race just to any people listening that don't know all about it?
So the boat race is a 6.8K race on the Thames in London, which is a tidal river, meaning that there's stream. So it's 6.8K, but we're rowing with some stream. So it's not as long if it was on flat water. And it's just two boats, Cambridge versus Oxford, side by side, and you just race all the way down the course. People say it's very much a coxswain's race because there's a lot of steering that goes into it. You do a coin flip and you choose which side of the river you want to be on. So you can either be on Middlesex or Surrey, and that gives you so like Middlesex has the early advantage because you have the inside of the bend, but then Surrey you get the advantage in the middle of the race. So it's very strategic, which is very different for me because I had normally just done 2K racing in buoyed lanes. So this was kind of a whole new ballpark that steering really came into it. The strategy of what side you're going to pick comes into it. And it's just so much longer than any other race. And it's also very historic because it's been going on for a long, long time. And people have very strong allegiances to Cambridge or Oxford. And also, it's like a huge spectator event. There's people that line all the way down the river, all 6.8K. And then it's also streamed on the BBC. So people in England just turn on their TVs and watch it like how in America we would watch football.
Yeah, it's like a massive thing there. Yeah, I feel like the biggest differences, right, are probably that it's like out of a stake boat, so that's something we would normally do in a sprint race, but it's longer than like a traditional head race. And yeah, that the course, the line you're taking matters like a lot, a lot.
Another thing that like was really different was to me was that the start you have to sit on the start line with your blades reverse feathered, and then when the umpire says go you have to flip your blades like into the water, so you can't sit like squared and ready, which was so stressful to me. I wish I had known that earlier so I could have prepared myself, but that was like really stressful part of the race.
No, that is stressful. It's just because the current is so strong, like you would just rip right out of the stake boat.
Yeah, yeah.
So what was it like? Like, because obviously in like college rowing, you're peaking for conference championship or NCAAs or whatever it is. And like, for when you did U23s, it's like peaking for one event. But this is really a whole year. And I know you guys did like run up stuff, but it's like a whole year for one day. So what was that experience like? What was different about the way that the team like trained and operated?
That was something that added some stress because it was, everything is leading up to this one day. But I honestly really liked it because it felt like our training was so incredibly pointed because we knew exactly, like, we were peaking for this one day to win this one race against one opponent. It was just kind of very black and white, which was nice that you knew exactly what you were doing it all for. But yeah, definitely it added some pressure because it's like, well, this is the day. It's not like, oh, but if we don't win the conference championships, hopefully we can get the at-large bid for NCAAs. It was like you either win or you don't. But then it was also nice because we have fixtures, which are all like little races leading up to the boat race where you race different segments of the course. So it was nice that they didn't really feel like races. They just felt like this is just preparation. And by the time I got to the start line of the boat race, like I felt so prepared because everything was leading up to that moment. And I didn't have any question of like, oh, like, can I do this? I had been preparing the whole year for it. So I was like, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for.
That's awesome. How early was your crew selected? Like, how soon before did you guys know, like, who was going to be in the boat?
We did it pretty early, which I was honestly kind of surprised by. So in the fall, we just kind of started rowing in eights, and our coach was kind of putting people that he thought would be in the eight very early on. So in the fall, we rowed lineups similar, but like it wasn't announced, nothing. We were just like practicing rowing together, but it ended up being pretty similar to that. And then we went on training camp in Italy the first week of January, and we basically rode that lineup. So then coming home from camp, the lineup was basically set. And then we did like a few rounds of seat racing late January. And then I would say by late January, the crew was set. And they always said that things could change, but it didn't really change.
How big is the team there? Because I know the reserve boat races as well. Like, is it a comparable to a U.S. collegiate team, or is it a little bit smaller or bigger?
Definitely smaller. The interesting thing is that it's considered that you're trialing for the boat race all season. So it was never like, oh, you're on the team. It was like you're a trialist and then like you make the boat. So we
Oh,
started off with 50 trialists and then slowly throughout preseason and the beginning of the season, they cut people. So it started off huge. And then after we do like ergs and seat racing, then they start to just knock people out. So we had the blue boat, the reserve crew, and the lightweights. So we had 3 8s that raced, and then we had 4 spares.
was most of what you did, like training wise, just similar to kind of what you had been doing? Were there any like huge surprises of like, oh, I've never done something like this before?
I would say the biggest change was that I think because it's like such a long race, we focus way more on like the intricate technical stuff. So like we used telemetry and we would have screens in the boat so we could always see everything we were doing, and that was nothing that I had done before. And when I first got here, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to think so much." But then I talked to the coach and he was like, "Well, it's 6.8K, like, you kind of need to be able to let the boat do its thing and not just always be like slamming it as hard as you can." So I think that was like a bit of an adjustment for me. But like training wise, very similar, I would say.
Did you get used to using like the Peach system, or is it still like data overload for you?
Yeah, I definitely got used to it. And then I was like joking that I felt like a screenager because I was always looking at my screen and I was like, I got to take the screen away because I'm like relying on it. So we would take them in and out, which is good so that we would have like a balance.
I feel the same way. It's a lot of data. I feel like it's sort of like going from like an erg to a RP3. Like all of a sudden there's just so much more data in front of you. Like sometimes that's nice, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's overwhelming.
And then, like, when the coach pulls up the whole overview of every single thing, and you're like, I don't even know what to look at. And it's just like power curves and circles and watts and length. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really helpful to use that. And I think that that helped our crew so much to be able to row together.
Yeah. So the actual race, first of all, like leading up to it, there just seems to be so much like history and culture. Like, was it really fun to do all of those things?
I thought it was so funny. Like for the official crew announcement, we went to Battersea Park and they literally had us ride down on escalators. Like as they announced your name, and then they had the Cambridge person and then the Oxford person ride down on escalators that were next to each other. And it was like, I felt so stupid because it was like the randomest thing. Like, why am I riding down on an escalator? They tried to make it so intense and stuff, which I liked. And then you like stood on the stage and shook hands with the counterparts. Like I shook hands with the Oxford stroke seat, and it's like, they're trying to create a battle, which is cool. And then leading up to the race, there was just like so much media, and like we did a bunch of stuff like where we were like introducing ourselves and they're filming us, and at like every day of race week there was a huge media launch following us, taking photos, taking videos. I kind of felt famous, which was cool. Just like the build up, especially, like it was cool to see how much people cared about the race and that people were really, really invested in us, which, yeah, I liked that.
I mean, you are famous. Like,
No.
yeah. That's awesome. I know it kind of reminds me like seeing the pictures. It's like when when fighting, like MMA fighting, and they like come up in front and they just like hold up their fists and like pose next to one another. It's like kind of what I feel like they want people in the boat race to do, but instead everyone just like stands there.
Yeah, literally. And then we would have to do these things where we were like staring straight faced into the counter person's eyes. And it was like so hard not to laugh because I'm like, what are we doing right now? But the media stuff, they got good. They got good content out of it, but doing it was a little bit weird.
I think they do such a good job with the coverage. Like there's so many interpersonal stories and just like you get people's backgrounds and see them as like whole people, which I think is what other sports do really well, right? And that's why you then, people like feel like they know people like Caitlin Clark or whatever, and that's why they like want to come back because they feel like connected to the person. I feel like that's what the boat race does really well in their media coverage. It's not just like, oh, pretty drone shots of rowing. It's like, no, these are the people and here's the classes they take and where they're from and what their hobbies are. Like here's the full rounded person.
Exactly. Like the BBC followed two girls from my crew through their day and went to class with them, and it was really funny because they wanted us to have a crew dinner for the media crew to follow. So I was like, okay, yeah, like I can host it. So the BBC was like filming me cooking everything for dinner. And I was like, and everyone was concerned because I'm really a bad cook. And they were like, Megan, you gotta like put on a show for the BBC. And I was like, I'm doing my best. But then sadly, they didn't put that footage on the boat race live stream, which was sad because they could have seen me cooking, but it's okay.
Maybe next time.
Yeah.
So the race itself, talk us through kind of that whole day because the race I know is like later in the day, what that was like.
So the race was at 2:46. We did our pre-paddle in the morning. All nine of us were living at a house together, which was walking distance from the boathouse, which was amazing. So after the pre-paddle, we went back to the house to just kind of like chill out. Then we had to walk back to the boathouse because they wanted to film us driving in with the bus. So it was like, we're watching Cambridge show up, but we couldn't drive because there was just like crowds everywhere. So it was kind of funny. We had to walk, as our coach said, incognito to the bus, like through all the crowds. So we were like trying to hide ourselves, but obviously like we were wearing our Cambridge gear. So everyone was like, oh my gosh, like it's Cambridge. And we're like walking through the crowds to like get into our bus so they can film us driving in. That was when it just got like really feeling real because then the cameras are watching us as we enter, we get out of the bus, there's crowds everywhere. Like we went to the official coin toss where the umpire flips the coin to see which side of the river we're on. We lost the coin toss, so Oxford got to pick their station and they picked Middlesex, which is the station that you get the early advantage. So we were like, okay, we'll be on Surrey. Then warm up, do the normal stuff. When it was time to launch, it was so cool because we were in the boathouse and the doors were closed, and then all the crowds lined up so that when we walked out of the boathouse, they like clapped us out, which was really, really cool. And they were filming us, and then got on the water, did our warm up. Then we got on the stake boat. That was the most stressful part of the race because my blade had to be reverse feathered. Like I've said it before, but it was so stressful. We had not a great start. Like, yeah, it wasn't our best. Oxford got up immediately. Then we like kind of walked back. We were always still down. I would say like 1K in, they really started to push and they got like 7 seats up. And that was our big thing. We were like, especially because we don't have the early advantage, like we expect to be down because their bend takes about 3 seats because they have the inside. So we were like, they can't get open water on us. We just have to like hold them until it's our turn to have the inside of the bend. I remember our coxswain saying they were 7 seats up and she was like, we cannot let them get more than this. And so then we put in a push. later I found out that they did get a little bit of open water on us. But then we put in a push and didn't let them get away. And then it was time for our inside of the bend, which was such a cool feeling because we started walking before we got to the inside of the bend, and then we were on the inside and we just started to like move through them, and we could just like, I was like, okay, we can actually do this. And that was just such a good feeling. And then we were walking away. We were about bow to stern. We stayed bow to stern for a bit of the race. Then all of a sudden, the crazy part of the race happened. Part of the boat race is that the umpire like warns the coxswains if they're going into the other team's water. And so the umpire started warning us. And so I was stroking. So part of my job was that I have to tell the coxswain when the umpire is warning us because her back is to him. So like I'm communicating with the coxswain. So he warns us. We move back like onto our side of the water. Then all of a sudden, like I swear in one stroke, Oxford is like nowhere near us. Then the next stroke, their boat makes boat to boat contact on our stern. And so all of a sudden I like scream to the coxswain that we need to do like our big move that we've been practicing. So I'm like, we need to do the killer burn. So then we do the killer burn, we shoot away from them. And then, yeah, after that, we just like took a lot of lengths on them. And then we ended up winning by 7 lengths.
Yeah, it was so, I mean, okay, I have a few questions. So I watched it. I watched it live. Because this was in the morning.
Oh, wow.
I was biking. I remember very clearly. Anyways, that's not important. You wrote it live. So one, did you feel nervous? It seemed like maybe Oxford had a little bit of, I don't know, maybe people thought that they were going to win. And then when they were like, took the early lead, it kind of seemed like the commentators were just like, yep, and this is what we expected to happen, like blah, blah, blah. Were you guys nervous at that point? Or were you just like, they had the early advantage, like we know what our rhythm is, this is fine?
We knew that we were most confident in our base pace.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that our start was not the best part of our race. With them having the early advantage on Middlesex and them being a very strong crew, we were kind of expecting them to be up. So I wasn't necessarily concerned when they were up. I would have been concerned if they had gotten open water, like a lot of open water on us, because I would be like, okay, this isn't great. But the fact that we were like, just like holding on to them, I was like, oh, this is totally fine. And also in the beginning part of our race, our rhythm just was not there. So it was kind of like, we just need to be internal and focus on like finding our own rhythm that we know works. And then once we get into that rhythm, we will be able to walk through them. So it was kind of like, I couldn't really even think about them because all I was thinking about was trying to fix the rhythm, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. What I feel like happens like when I'm rowing, often I'll watch it back later and be like, oh, this felt different. Like you said, oh, I found out later they got open water. Like it's the same thing of, oh, I did not realize how far behind we were. And like the same thing you're saying, like I wasn't really focused on them. I was like, I need to do, or our plan is to do this.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting to watch back your racing with commentators because that can like totally change how you view the race. Like you have your own opinion of what happened in the race. And then when the commentators are like, the Cambridge boat doesn't look to be moving that well, you're like, oh, that's right. We weren't moving that well. It totally erases what you think because you just hear them say it and then you agree with them. So I remember in that part of the race being like, okay, we just got to get it together and it'll be fun.
But then you guys, like, you could see how when you were moving as a crew, you guys were just like, yeah. Literally, when you guys started moving, I was, like, watching with a few of my teammates. Everyone was like, oh, they're literally going to win. They're now rowing with, like, confidence maybe, or I don't know.
That's exactly how it felt. The rhythm at the start was it just kind of felt like we were nervous. We were very confident in our base pace, but we just needed to get into our base pace. And then once it was there, it was like, oh, yeah. This is who we are. But it just took us a little bit longer than I would have liked to get into it.
But yeah, the crash, or it wasn't really quite a crash, but the incident was pretty crazy. Then like after the race, it seemed like they were talking to the umpire for a really long time. Like what was kind of going through your mind at that point?
Yeah, that was the longest 4 minutes of my life. So we crossed the finish line and they immediately put up the red flag because the Oxford coxswain had put up his hand, meaning that he was protesting the race, which, like, we knew he was going to protest the race. Then they start deliberating, and it was for 4 minutes. So we were just sitting there. Like, I think the people in the bow didn't know that they had actually hit us. So we crossed the line and they're like celebrating. And someone was like, we just won the boat race. And then someone else turned around and was like, well, we might not have. And then the people in the stern were like, oh my gosh, like they hit us. We don't know what's going to happen, because there had been this whole docu-series before about how last year Oxford tried to bump Cambridge to try to get them disqualified. And it's kind of been an ongoing thing that if you bump the crew in front of you, they'll disqualify it. And this was the first year that they had actually hit us. And so we were like, oh my gosh, like we could get disqualified. But like our coxswain said, I was in my water. Like, we were not in the wrong. I don't know what the umpire will decide, but like we were in our own water, and like we trusted her with that. But it was so scary. We just kind of sat there in silence as they deliberated. And then finally the umpire put up the white flag, meaning that we had won. But I didn't know that the white flag meant that we had won. So like everyone was celebrating, and I was like, does that mean we won? Like, what happened? I don't know. But then like everyone in the boat was celebrating, and I was like, okay. I think we weren't disqualified. I think it's fine. But it was so stressful because it was like we had just done the whole thing, and then just to sit there and not know was like so painful.
Yeah, like on TV, it was fun, or on the live stream, it just was the other boat and the umpire, but it didn't show you guys at all. And everyone was like, where did they go? Like, what are they doing? Like, did they get to like argue their side? Because that was.
Yeah, we were just sitting there in silence. Nothing.
But yeah, like we were saying, they were letting the Oxford coxswain like argue his point. But like, it would have been interesting if they had made some sort of decision without letting your coxswain argue. They were only getting one side of the story.
I don't really know if they had agreed with the Oxford coxswain. I don't know if they just immediately would have disqualified us, or if we would have had some say in it. Or some people were saying that then we would have to re-row the race on Sunday, which would have been brutal because like I was down bad after that. Like I had exerted myself to then do it again the next day. So yeah, I don't really know what would have happened, but I'm glad that it worked out in our favor.
Yeah. So what was the rest of the day like? Like after getting to celebrate, I'm sure there was like some fancy party dinner thing.
So we had like a whole award ceremony, which was really fun because we get to go up on the stage and they give us these huge bottles of champagne. And then we like sprayed the president who was holding the trophy. Champagne was like flying everywhere, which was fun. And then we went to this really like nice boat race dinner, which was at a hotel in London. And you get dressed up and you get to wear your blazers. So like I had my new Cambridge blue blazer because after the boat race, it means that you like won your blue, which is like similar to a varsity letter in the US. So then now like you get these big blazers, and we wore the blazers to the dinner. We had talks. You sit with alumni that have raced in the boat race. You get to like meet them, just hang out with your crew. It was really fun. A really good night.
That's so fun. So what's it been like since then? Because I know sometimes you guys can keep racing or go to Henley or stuff like that. Are you still like rowing and going to do any of that stuff? Or are you just focused on school now?
So we had a week off after the boat race, and now we're back to it. We're racing in Bucks, which is the British University Championships. We're basically just entering every event possible. Like I'm racing 5 different events, race as many 2Ks as possible. And then the blue boat is going to a race in Croatia in the middle of
Wow.
May, which will be fun. And then we're going to Henley. We're doing like a full Henley campaign.
That's so fun. Have you been to Henley before?
No, it's my first time.
Oh, you're going to have a great time. Henley's the best.
I'm so excited.
That's awesome. Do you know what you're going to do next year? Like, are you going to keep rowing in the US or trying to get a job?
I graduate late July, and then I'm going to come back to the US and I want to keep rowing.
That's awesome. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Do you feel like that was something you knew before this year, or do you feel like this year helped you make that decision?
I've always wanted to. This was like a way to continue my academics while like I kept rowing. This was to get a degree that would help me so that if I like focus on rowing, I like have a degree so that I can eventually get a job.
I think that's smart. And I think it's interesting. Like, everyone is different in what they feel like they need to make elite rowing in the US like palatable for them. You know, like some people want to be going back to school. Some people want to be working a certain amount because I mean, especially if you have like a lengthy career and you've just done only rowing, like that can be a little bit stressful of how am I going to get a job? I think that is a stress for a lot of people.
I also thought that like going to a new country where I didn't know anyone would like push me out of my comfort zone. And I thought that that would help me be a better person, which would then help me be a better rower if I was just like used to doing things that were uncomfortable. So that was like another thing. I'm just going to like learn to be super adaptable by doing this. So my like key word of the year is to be adaptable.
I mean, I'm sure it's been an awesome experience.
Yeah, it really has. And like the team is amazing. I really like them. So it's all been a big positive.
That's so awesome. Sometimes we like wrap up with some questions for me, but no worries at all if you don't have any. But if you do, fire away.
I do.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually an avid listener of the podcast. Yeah, I've listened to every episode.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. Like I have the notifications on for when a new episode comes out. Like I'm not making this up. Yeah. So I'm wondering what your favorite episode to film has been, or like if there was an interview that was like, oh wow, like I had so much fun doing that one.
Oh my gosh. I mean, impossible to pick. My favorite part has been like getting to talk to people. I'm like blown away by the stories that people share and like the insights and just how thoughtful and committed, and getting to hear more about everyone's like what motivates them and why they are pursuing sports, like even if it's not rowing. I'd say I had this guy Norman that was an Olympic kayaker a few decades ago. And he actually lives in Saratoga. So I got to interview him in person. And that was just really cool. Like, I just really enjoyed the conversation with him. And I felt like it's cool how even someone that like hasn't been in elite sport in, you know, a little while, still like so many of the things are the same, and like the motivations are the same, and the way you feel is the same, and all that stuff. So I thought that was really cool.
I liked that one too.
Yeah, he was really fun. And honestly, it was so funny. We like couldn't get out of there. We recorded the episode, but we probably talked to him for like another hour. Like it was really funny.
That's fun.
The hilarious thing though is my boyfriend coaches rowing at Harvard, and he was there when we recorded, and Norman went to Harvard. So I was like kicked to the curb immediately, and it was just like, let's talk Harvard men's rowing or whatever. And I was just like, okay.
I'm here too, guys.
Yeah, like literally. I did one with Liz Fusco, who's our dietitian. I really liked her episode also. I just thought she had like a lot of really good things to share. So
cool. Well, I love the podcast and I love listening. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I'll be cheering you on this summer.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, and thank you so much to Megan for coming on. I know Megan is going to have a super bright future in our sport, and I can't wait to cheer her on for years to come. To end the show this week, I'm sharing a quote that I actually am not sure where it is from, but I've had it in my quotes note on my phone for a while, and I just really like it. So I'm sorry to whoever said it, but I appreciate you. So it goes, good players work out, but great players outwork. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. See you next time. Bye. I'd love to hear from you, so send us a topic suggestion, or if you'd like to submit a question for our Ask Kristi Anything segment, head to our website, theother3years.com.